talking about Rumble.
Rumble is uniquely Rumble.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I have hated YouTube and also begrudgingly watched YouTube for a very long time.
Sure.
And I have wanted to create a YouTube channel for a period of time, but like by the time I got around to it, there became the issue of like them kicking off all the people I was trying to aspire to be.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, they shadow banning and the liberal leftist
Bullshit, nonsense, but like actually kicking people off the platform, like the bannings, like
cancel culture and all
right.
that.
And what I found is even if you try and play by the rules, what they've been doing is killing the ability for the right to replenish itself, meaning that the Steven Crowders, the Daily Wires, they have millions of dollars.
Right.
Which means lawyers. So if they get fucked with, they can countersue, they can,
Sure.
drag YouTube through the contract and all the things and saying, like, look, we follow the rules, all the things. Whereas, if we get hit with strikes, we don't have money for lawyers to sue YouTube.
Sure.
We just don't.
The mom and pop little guy, whatever.
Right. The people who are the startups.
Right.
The people
they get
who
squashed.
would the people to replace or be the future are the ones getting squashed, which would be us. So my thought process was, why would I ever, as a business, want to start a business where it was going to be, like, there's no future.
Right, it's almost guaranteed. Like, we know this going in.
Right. So I've done a couple of things in the past, because, like, I have a video production background, and I've actually produced, like, television before for NBC, a local station, but still, like, but the thing there is like we had a weekly show and we had a team.
Right.
Right? So, like, there's trying to do something that's daily content, which is my goal here, and have that be the two of us, and not to try and denigrate you, but, like, you are on camera and you're a great personality and I love you. When the timer gets turned off, you do nothing. Like, I'm not trying...
Sure. Like, I do things, not this.
Right, yes. Like we have our gender, role topic discussion, but,
sure.
like, I am alone in trying to get stuff out. And there has just been, like, this is way, way more difficult than I want it to be.
Sure. Yeah, like, unfortunately, my background is not in cinema, movie editing.
Sure, like there's no issue here. So when I did this a little bit before, what I wanted to do initially was kind of shoot it as professionally as possible. So, like, I would, get my professional cinema camera and make these huge files and then edit things on my, like, my Apple on, like, ProRes and everything, and then you have to go through the hell that every single video social media site has its own, like, codec that it wants, and its formatting that it wants, and, like, there's file sizes, there's time sizes, everyone is uniquely difficult, except for YouTube. Like, that's the problem. But again, like, if you go on YouTube...
I'm so sorry.
You're good. But if you go through YouTube, you have problems. And we, originally when we started this, tried to do both. Because our perception was, if we did YouTube and Rumble, it's not so much extra work. And we were also having a lot more troubles with Rumble initially, so we're like, let's try and, like, at least build on YouTube. When they kick us off, they kick us off.
Sure.
But... what we've already discovered on YouTube is we were going actually really quickly on YouTube, like pretty quickly. Like, we went from, our first video was like 10, and then it was like 20, and then we were getting like 50, and then we were getting like 100 views.
Right, and
then down, and then they started deleting the views and the hours of things that had already been watched, and like we had one thing that had like 100 and some views, and then they deleted like 80% of the views to where there's more likes that show than people who viewed it to have liked it.
Which is wonky.
Yeah, like, it's just weird, and it's like, we went from increasing every video to, really quickly. And I don't know what the word that got put into the algorithm where we're just like, nope, here, we're just not going to promote you anymore, and we're going to watch you very quickly to ban you. And it's like, at that point, we haven't registered for the getting money part from them yet. Like, this is just kind of like we're playing around at this to kind of get what a workflow would be.
Right.
So my thought process is even if it's, a couple hundred views a week, they're still making money on that, and fuck YouTube. Like, that's my thought on it. It's like, why would we...
Well, they're taking the content and eliminating all of the liability, which is, we're not going to recognize the creator, we're not going to give you we're not even going to give you due credit. It's not even about the money yet. It's just, we're not even going to recognize your views or likes or whatever. Like, we're going to skew those.
Right. I mean, like, at this point, because, like, our numbers are so small, they're memorable, like, in the beginning. So, like, when you're deleting 50 hours of watching and hundreds of views that equal almost, like, a third of our entire view and hours watched, I notice.
Right.
So it's like... are they shadow banning in the not showing it to people as much? Are they, getting more views and more hours and then just not accrediting them to us? And, like, how does that go to scale? Like, this is just, like, shadiness on its...
Well, it's non-verifiable.
Right.
Because it's not like we have access to the stats and where we could say, oh, yeah, we could validate, that was us. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that was us watching it to make sure that there was no issues or whatever. And like, we validate removing the 1 or 2 hours that you and I watched to whatever. But there is no accountability.
Right.
It's just, YouTube said, so therefore it must be.
Right. I mean, it's funny because our second most watched video is now, like, basically they deleted all of the viewing, whatever, for it. And it's like... it's weird because, like, obviously it was popular if it was our second most watched video, and then now to see it not getting any views, and it's like it has a ton of likes and comments, but no views or hours, and now it's not showing and no one's watching it, which, like, like, the whole thing is just like it's this kind of wonkiness that makes me like, I don't even want to play games. Like, I don't even want to play ball. Like, the amount of time it takes to upload to YouTube as an extra, because they'll take any codec, so I can do everything for Rumble and then just upload it to YouTube. It literally takes me maybe 5-10 minutes of extra work. But even then, I'm like, fuck YouTube. Fuck them. Like, legitimately, like, why would I want them to make money off of my stuff? Because even if we ended up getting paid, like, they're making the majority of it, and if you're treating me poorly, like, I don't want to help someone who's a piece of shit be a piece of shit to me and others. And I feel like, for me at least, when I think of Rumble and I think of alt tech, so often what you have is these companies, and I'm going to call them companies, the larger kind of alternative media.
Sure.
Who, your Steven Crowders, your Ben Shapiro's, all those people, and they have teams. They have a group of producers. So, like, they shoot a show for, whomever, and it's, they probably have a person for every media platform. So it goes out, and it,
Sure, he has a full...
Right.
He has a fully staffed staff.
Right.
Yeah.
Which we do not. So, for me, it was about how do I do a daily show and keep things up in quality, and, like, where are the margins for that? Like,
sure.
So doing a multi-camera, like, actual video cameras, which I do own, there was just a lot of time suck for that, because, like, and again, I'm probably going to get way more technical than anybody wants.
That happens.
But, like, you shoot on high, like, the higher bit rate and resolution and all the things, the bigger the file sizes are. So then you have to upload them on the computer and upload them into your editing software, which then has to copy the files. And, like it's... that program then has to analyze the files before you can edit or export. And then you have to export, and then you have to upload. And I just found that process was, even on a one camera show, was taking me, I don't know, 3-4 hours.
Sure.
And
it's
then
3 or 4 hours for a 2-hour show.
Right, which isn't the worst. But then, like, having edited, 2 or 3 camera takes, then you're talking about maybe an extra 4 to 5 hours, which, again, like, if you figure I'm shooting for 2 hours with you, and then I'm, doing 3 hours of just basic computer whatever, and then another 3 or 4 hours of it, it's not, I couldn't do a show a day. It would be like a show every other day.
Right.
And, at that point, like, we were debating on the idea of having, like, 1 show a week or 2 shows a week and having them be superbly produced.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm working full time to get those out.
Right.
And I was thinking about that and deciding, I really, just from a life standpoint, have wanted to simplify things. Like, it's just been kind of our mission statement in life. So, like, for those of you who have been watching, like, one of the big things that we talk about on the show regularly is, like, we don't really watch television, we don't really watch news. So there are things that need to kind of replace what you're doing, and we can get into that. But one of the things that we've really been looking at is like, I have so much camera equipment and video equipment. We've been really just like, it takes up so much space in the house that, like, we've been looking to have this be our full-time job.
Right.
But also not 100% knowing where the margins are with that.
Right.
So the easiest answer that, like, I could come up with is, with all the AI crap and whatever, why not just do it on my phone? Like, there is a cinematographer part of me that's like,
Yeah, like, it's one of those things. Whenever you're an expert in the field,
right,
and you put less than expert quality
right,
product, it bothers you internally, because you're like,
right,
I could
do better, but it takes time.
Right, but it's also, I mean, so you said it's just not sustainable from a weekly standpoint, but, like, me, I'm like, that's not sustainable on a life scale, where compounded mental fatigue of doing this week after week after week with no stop.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, maybe you could do it every day for 2 weeks, but on the 3rd week, you'd be like, look, I need a week off.
And I think that's why our inconsistency has been happening to the point that it has, because, like, I would try something harder than I thought it would be. I do it, but then, like, I get to a point where I'm like, I need a day off. I can't do this tomorrow. This is, I did an 18-hour day yesterday. I didn't spend time with our children. Therefore, like...
not only that, I didn't sleep. It's not even like I didn't see you. I also didn't see all of our family. And I didn't, like, I can't continue. Like,
right.
I need to rest. So now everything is on pause.
Right. And the other part of that is like, we've talked about formatting and potentially going down to, like, 10, 12-minute segments. But the problem is we're both long-winded. And 2, I also feel like I'm not those people, like the 10-minute segments. Like, I feel like this is much more like talk radio or a podcast. Like, I feel like we're much more designed in the way that we talk and our delivery for long form.
Sure. We are very loquacious, to be sure.
Sure. So the idea of, like, trying to cut that down didn't make sense to me, because then, like, both of us are, like, rushing to get our thoughts out, and it didn't turn out well. Like, I have a slow Southern, like, way of speaking. And it is what it is. Like, you either like it or not. I'm not here to, like, try and...
It is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Like, I feel like it's a very country folk type of... Like, when you grow up country folk, you're
not in a hurry.
You are never in a hurry.
Right. So, I mean... Anyways, so my point is that I didn't think that, like, a 10-minute... like, doing a 10-minute video obviously has a faster turnaround than doing, like, the 2-hour content that we've been doing. So, like, going on the phone, I thought, like, okay, if I can do... Because initially, like, I was thinking, well, can I do 3... Like, because we have, multiple cell phones. So, like, I have my iPhone, she has hers, and we have a third one for family member. So like we could potentially shoot 3. So I was thinking about doing it in a more cinematic way or a more, traditional way of like my face, her face, and a wide, which would be similar to, like Joe Rogan or something of that nature.
Sure, it's much more cinematic. It's also more, visually interesting. It's more
Right.
engaging. It's also a shit ton more work.
Right, because like when you think about Joe Rogan, he maybe shoots 2 or 3 episodes a week, and here's the thing: he doesn't shoot any of it. He has a guy whose full-time job is
Sure.
to edit and whatever those things, and also there is a piece of equipment there where like you have these 2 or 3 cameras, and it's called the video lake, and then there's cords that come from the cameras into an editor, so it's edited live. That way, like you're saying, like we're going to record from this camera, then we're going to record like that's how that works. So you're not editing later on.
Sure.
So like as a producer, like pushing the button of the person who's talking, so you get the shot that's needed in the moment live, takes much less work. The thing is,
It also takes a lot more finesse, though. Like, you
Right.
have to have experience. This isn't like, oh, let's get one of our children in here
Right.
and, just push the button. Like, no, it takes finesse and training. And
right.
Like,
So like, and I thought about maybe even getting that kind of equipment to have me do it. Live on the spot, but like I don't like the problem is the moment.
multitasking.
Well, it's multitasking. Like if I'm in charge of camera, I can't like my mind is on that and not on speaking. So if
Right.
I'm trying to talk, like in this setup that we have with just one cell phone, it's running and I'm not thinking about it. Like after I get to make sure that lighting and framing is decent, which sometimes we're more in a hurry than other days.
Sure.
I'm not thinking about it. Like, there's nothing moving, there's nothing, like, it's a very static environment. But, anyways, so because we can't do the video lake idea, like I just explained, is in a live smorgasbord, I'd have to edit it. So then the issue becomes, like, well, I thought, like, if I could edit on the phone and upload, it would be faster because you're cutting out steps. But the problem there is that it's actually harder to share files between like file sharing like large files between cell phones
Not the
becomes
easiest task.
it's more of a nuisance than I thought it would be.
Right.
And so like then there was the issue of we're trying to go to Rumble, and the reason why Rumble has been all kinds of screwed up is that the Rumble app has not worked for me, and like there's a trick to it. But, like, it's not... I mean, I don't want to say, like, there should be an instruction manual, but
Well, it's not intuitive.
Right. So, the thing is like, So, what I've been doing is, like, typically, there's a couple minute banter to kind of get our wits up, and then we cut the end off and we stick the intro on. So, like, editing is very minimal here. So, then I just upload to YouTube, and then I tried to do the same thing with Rumble. The issue is that in the YouTube app, you can upload in the background. So like once I hit upload, I can be working on, creating the thumbnail. I can be working on doing other things, and it's just working in the background. Well, with the Rumble app, it only uploads if it is the main app that is on the front of the screen.
It basically takes proprietary precedence. Like, there can not be anything else.
Right. So then, like, if you minimize the Rumble screen and go do another task and come back, it will delete the progress and start over. So it's like I would start uploading a video to Rumble and then do something else and then go back and check on Rumble, and it was at 1% and now it's at 1% again. And like no matter how long I would let that go, it would never get above 1. It wasn't until like I tried it again, because we keep thinking like, well, they're alt tech, so they're making updates all the time, and there's a lot of things on Reddit about how many updates they're doing and how many things that they're fixing. So we thought maybe like we're at wit's end, they will fix something. So I tried uploading something last night, and so I'm uploading and I'm doing other stuff and it's still not working. So I just sat the thing down and frustrated, and then we went off and did something, and I came back to my phone and it was halfway loaded, and I was like, well, I guess it's just an issue of like it has to be left alone until it's finished, which means that since I'm trying to do everything on my phone, that's a half hour, 45 minutes that I can't do anything.
Forced break.
Yeah. So, that kind of sucks. There's also things like you can't edit. So I found out that you can actually go in and edit the video.
On Rumble?
On Rumble.
Oh, neat.
It's not fixed, but you have to be on a computer to do it.
Ah.
There's no option on the phone app, which, like, the fact that you're missing features on the phone app is a little troubling. There's also, like, a lot of weird other issues. So, like, initially, the problem I was having with Rumble is we were trying to shoot on my phone, upload it to a storage, like a online storage folder, then download it on a computer, and then upload it. And what we were finding is like initially we started trying to do 4K videos.
That was
one, you're dealing with obnoxious file sizes, but the other issue is that Rumble has a 15 gigabyte limit.
Correct.
So when you're doing long form content with Rumble, that becomes an issue because, our file sizes were ginormous.
Right, at 4K, absolutely.
Right, and even at 1080. And then what I would end up doing is after I downloaded them to my laptop, I would have to then upload them into an editor and then downscale them. So I was like, fuck this. Let's do 1080. 1080 still files too big. So I went down to 720, and it's much more manageable because what I was having to do with these file sizes is both on my computer with an external hard drive or on my phone. Like between every video, we couldn't do the next video until we had deleted the previous one because it was just the entire phone, the entire computer, everything was just hundreds of gigabytes for these things. Everybody's like, a 4K video shouldn't be hundreds of gigabytes. The thing is that when you're dealing with editing files, they copy. Mm-hmm. So
you have to have a working file.
Right.
So you have two different files.
Right. So that was a nightmare. And then trying to transfer and then all the things over. So even at the 720, it was weird because like when I would get just the raw video file from the phone, it would be about 4 or 5 gigs. At 720, and then when I would go through the editor and cut off, so it goes from 5 to like 12 just from going through the video editor. Mm-hmm. So that is a nuisance because I have no idea what information was created.
It's just inflating.
It's when the editor creates a new file, it's just inflating the file size. I don't really know what's being added to it, but again, like you're dealing with stupid files and you're having to transfer it over. So I'm actually really happy that I now feel confident that I can upload to Rumble reliably from my phone without creating other steps that would take me hours every day. So my workflow can be much faster. What I would like to do now is just try and build on Rumble alone because again, like just uploading to all these sites, dealing with feedback, dealing with comments, it's too much. And and that's the thing, like it might only be 10 extra minutes to upload to YouTube, but it's also comments, it's also optimization, it's also researching changes and user agreements and like what you can and can't say.
And they just recently redid their user agreement. I mean, when I say recently, I mean within like the last week or maybe 2.
I mean, I feel like they do that once a month-ish, and you have to stay on top of it. And then, like, the weird part is YouTube retroactively holds you accountable. So, let's say you uploaded a video 10 years ago, and it just today, they release a new rule that you violated 10 years ago before it was a rule. They can, like, block your whole it's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, when they made that big change during the, like, 2020 COVID time.
Sure.
I remember one of my favorite creators they put out a whole like emergency post where they were like, look, we might be banned. We might have to go through hundreds and hundreds of hours of content because we are not sure if we're going to be in violation. And so we might have to archive literally everything. And that to like for us now, it's not at the hundreds. Like it's not a unsurmountable amount of hours.
I mean, we probably have 20 hours. No, yeah, about 20, 25 hours of content.
But now, if they do a user agreement, it would be like, okay, this is arduous and annoying.
Right.
But can you imagine after a year, just 1 year, having however many hours of content that you're like, I don't know, I could be in violation, but I don't remember.
Sure. I mean, absolutely. So, yeah, the other problems that we've been having is like codec problems between the video recording codec and the editing codec. Also, like trying to find a good, cheap video editor on my phone, which, as someone who's done professional editing work on like, Avid and some of the other like complicated video editors, like we're using iMovie and it's the iPhone iMovie, which is, I mean,
as basic as basic gets.
It feels painful. It's actively painful. I feel like I've created a workflow that works within it, but I can't imagine adding another camera angle. Like, in terms of work time, like I would then have to go back to going to a professional editor again.
Right.
Or hiring someone, and like we've decided no matter how much money we do or don't make, we're never hiring another person to come into our lives, because the reason this works is because it, I feel like there's a low cost of production.
Sure.
Here.
I mean, it's also very like we're country folks, so we're not ever getting it to a place where we're going to move to a metropolis type area. You know what I mean? So finding that type of resource in rural America, slim to none.
Well, it's not just that. It's like I said, like I could do it technically with the camera and the equipment and like whatever, but like it's time. It's really, that's what it comes down to.
Well, it's also job function. Either you're on screen or you are off screen, but you can't simultaneously, run the video editing live while trying to.
I think I could. You and the kids just never see me. That's the real answer.
Sure.
Like I feel like it could be done to a higher degree, but it's still trying to figure out the most productive workflow for this imaginable. But like, then we get to the next problem with Rumble, which is like we really don't have an answer for yet, which is there are very few people who've made it on Rumble. And by that, I don't mean that there are not people making money on Rumble. That's not my point. But they are people, there's no one I've heard of that's being pulled up as the Rumble made person. So
yeah, as the viral Rumble
person.
Yeah, what do you call it? Like the flagship. I mean, I haven't heard of a flagship Rumble person as a like everybody needs to Rumble or everybody needs to go to Rumble because
right.
Such and such creator.
I mean, right now there is such a person. It's Steven Crowder.
Right, but he's not native.
That's what I'm saying is all of the people on Rumble are people who are previous YouTube, internet celebrity types who have signed on to Rumble.
Yeah, because they got kicked off the YouTube island.
Because they got kicked off the YouTube island or various other platforms. I mean, like when I mean, you don't have your phone next to you. I'd almost be curious to look at what the biggest channels are, but I know, like, off the top of my head, the big ones that I can think of is Steven Crowder, the guy used to be married to Katy Perry, the Brit.
I see his face and his accent. I do have my phone.
No, we're good. It's fine. Dan Bongino, who was formerly on Fox News as one of the hosts, like he produced his show and like it went, like Fox kind of bought it but never owned him. And when his contract expired, he still does his show. It's just on Rumble and online now. But like again, none of these people are exclusive. They're not even exclusive. Like even though they like fly the Rumble banner and tell everyone that they should. Like the preferred method is Rumble. They're still on YouTube.
I was going to say they still double dip.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
100%. And again, because they have teams too, like they have producers and production that, can man and fully support multiple channels.
Well, what this reminds me of is who's the guy who runs the family trivia? Steve
Harvey?
What it reminds me of is Steve Harvey. Like I saw a video rather recently of his workday. And he produces like 3 shows daily where he gets up at like 4 a.m. and he does like a talk show morning thing. And then he has a radio talk show. And then he has like a live talk show. And then he does the whatever that family trivia game. Family Feud. And then he does Family Feud. And so he's on camera all day, right? And he's producing these, just an insane amount of content. Sure. However, to your point, there's dedicated teams for the radio show. There are dedicated teams for the talk show. There are dedicated teams for Family Feud. Like, yes, he's working. I'm not trying to say that he's not working. That's not at all what I'm trying to say. But what I'm saying is there's no way that we could output that amount of content without a dedicated team.
Absolutely. So, as much as it pains me to some degree to have this be like static, I also feel like we're in a weird place where like we're moving between residencies. So, I would eventually want to have a studio room where we have a more dedicated and not just dedicated, but a more dynamic set.
Sure.
It's pretty to look at and kind of really figure out what our frame is and then, work towards that.
Sure. And I totally get that. Also I feel like we have, I think you said between 20 and 25 hours of content. I feel like when most people are looking at those very first videos, they're like, you are still learning.
Well,
and yes. I don't mean that in an insulting way, but it's just one of those, like, there's a learning curve to anything.
Well, I don't think it's so much a learning curve as just like if you wait for perfect, like if we were going to do this perfectly and do tests and all of the things, there would have been a month where we were building a set and doing tests and doing lighting and whatever, and we wouldn't have been producing content. We would have been
testing,
producing like other things,
right?
And like the best way to learn, like especially workflow because every shoot, every whatever is different. So the best way to learn how to do something that's very particular is to do it and then figure out where the whatevers are. Because again, like when I worked doing television, part of it was live, part of it was staged, but it was a week-long thing, and it had, I want to say, 12 or 15 people dedicated to getting that out every week. So, we don't have 12 or 15 people, and we're not doing a show a week.
We have one guy.
And
that's you.
And we're doing it every day. So, but back to Rumble, and the biggest problem they have is the reason why they're not creating fan bases on YouTube, why there isn't the Rumble guy, the way there's plenty of YouTube channels that have been created, is that unlike what Google does, where they track everything about you and they know every detail and everything that you like, so when you get on, which is scary in and of itself, when you get on YouTube, you get recommendations based upon the niche of what they think you will like.
It's very curated.
Whereas Rumble doesn't track you at all.
Yeah.
So they really show you things based upon what's already doing well, which if you're starting out, you're not already doing well, you're starting out. Or 2, what's recent, which is a crapshoot. Like, there's only so much that we can do in terms of, figuring out when large swaths of people are on and trying to have content, be scheduled to be released at that time. But then other people are doing the same thing and you're drowned out in the sea of people, hosting content at that time.
It is what it is. Part of the thing about being tracked is that, it makes things really easy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you mention a product near your phone and suddenly all of your ads are, you know, insert product here, which is scary.
The things that I like.
It's scary, but convenient. I mean,
Right.
there's a reason why people complain, but not too much.
Mm-hmm.
But then, I mean, the alternative is you then have to search painstakingly.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be honest, we're very used to the curated, let me just provide you what I think you'll like. And let's also be honest, more often than not, even if you didn't think you would have liked it, because you like it a little bit, you're more likely to watch something you like a little bit than to actually go and look for something you might like more.
Right.
So,
I mean, that's a weird one, but like, I also just think about this in terms of how I use Rumble because, you know, it's weird in the sense of like, you know, I like Steven Crowder, so I follow Steven Crowder. So, like, you know, if you go over and you search for his page and you follow it, unlike on YouTube, where, you know, like we had, like, we lost more than half of our subscribers who got kicked off from being our subscribers. And, like, apparently that's a huge problem on things. I don't hear that being a problem on Rumble. So, like,
okay.
you know, when I have my feed of my subscribed content, it all shows up. Like, there's nothing being hidden from me in that sense. However, there's then the problem of if you're not following it, like when I look through and I like try and find other people who are doing the Rumble experiment with me. And by the Rumble experiment, I'm not talking about the Dan Bongino's, the Donald Trump Jr.'s.
Right. You're talking about the little guys.
The little guys who are starting up who might want to like do content with us or whatever. It's so not what I'm looking for or things that I'm interested in. I almost just give up. Like I'm not like just.
It's very tedious.
It's very tedious because you're scrolling through and it's like, you know, you think about every video on YouTube and it's like there's things I like and there's things I don't like, but like, you know, it's so random, the videos that are being uploaded because it's time-based. You know, there's things about gardening, flowers, and, like, whatever. And it's
next
like,
to, like, cookies. And
next
then
to cookies, next to video
karate.
games, next to karate, next to politics.
Yeah.
You know, and the politics are very varying. And, like, I feel like if you're going to listen to political content, most people want to hear things that they kind of agree with or they're kind of searching out for. So, like,
right.
You know, when you're, like, you know, scrolling through the random suggested content, they're suggesting the people who brought their audience from elsewhere, or you're getting just random crap, which, like, it stresses me out to the point where, like, if I look through the people I follow and I've watched it all or I don't care about the specific video that they put out, I find myself going back to YouTube if I'm wanting to just search around and find something to watch. Because
it's a more enjoyable experience.
It's a much more enjoyable experience.
Sure.
And I feel like our watch algorithms on Rumble say the same thing. Like, yes, people can do it if you bring your audience from elsewhere. And I'm actually, like, almost trying to take this as a challenge to grow organically on Rumble. But it's a very different interface than I'm used to.
Yeah.
And the only way around it, and the only thing that I found that kind of works, is to really get your hashtag game and your keyword search game, because what you hope for is that people search for what you're looking for. However, since we're kind of a broad topic channel, the problem there becomes, you know, if it was how to fix a light bulb or how to fix a thing, you know, it's easy to find whatever. If you're reviewing an item, you know, people are searching for that item.
Right.
That's fine. But we're talking about like more generic, hopefully entertaining content.
Right.
Which feels like way more generic and difficult to define for a specific user base.
Sure. And there's also the like TikTok method of where content creators simply just look at what hashtags are trending at that moment. So if it's whatever, Billie Eilish, right? So she just sends out a song or what have you, and the title of that song is trending, whether or not it has anything to do with their video, they put that song tag in there.
Right.
Which to me is very grimy.
Right.
Like, that's it. I get it in the sense that you're trying to get views, but that's very grimy. You're lying.
Right. People are searching for that and they're getting random fucking videos.
Exactly. And I don't want to be that kind of channel where it's like, they just put in, hashtag of the hour because they know it'll bring people. And
I mean, I do, not to that extent, but like if we even mention something in passing in a video that I think will be trending, I like, even though that's not the brunt of what people who might be searching for that are looking for.
Sure.
Like,
I still feel that that's fair though. Like if your video is on to like use your example, like if your video is on gardening and you're like, Billie Eilish's new song Tag that just released today. Really?
Right.
You know what I mean? But I mean, we generally mention a plethora of topics while we're. So I feel like any of those are open game.
Yeah, I mean, that's my general topic. I feel like we're going to still be playing around. I feel like there's different apps that we've been using to, get some of the technical bits right. So like, using Apple, I'm wondering if the reason our file sizes are doubling and almost tripling in some cases is switching between HVEC and H.264. So I found a program that we're recording in today that records in H.264, so there won't be a conversion when we do the edit. So I'm just curious to see like what file sizes are at the end of this and like trying to.
It'll be interesting for sure. I mean, Apple is notorious for making proprietary things,
right?
File names and programs and whatever, and so it doesn't surprise me that their proprietary file format is inflated.
Right.
That seems on par.
Well, I mean, I think the reason they do that, it has to do with the fact that, like, if you're a video editing software, right, and you're going to be able to work with Apple files, the HVEC, I think they're called, files, that are video files, you have to buy or pay them to be able to process their codec because it's proprietary.
Right.
So by doing so, anything shot on an iPhone now that's edited anywhere else, that other company, has to pay 50 cents or $1
to read it.
Right.
It's the Pages thing. Like, you actually have to export from Pages and export as like a docx or a .pdf or whatever. And I had that problem the entire time I was going to college.
Right.
Which was, I would forget, or I was working really fast, or it'd be late at night, and I'd send the file over to my professor, and they'd be like, I can't open it. And I'm like, because I forgot to export it in a generic file name, or not file name, file format.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm just thinking about alt tech in general, and again, like we've talked about Rumble, and by far Rumble is the best alt tech that I've come across. And I'm not saying that to be like, backhanded or whatever. I mean, there's problems. Like it's not, the user experience is not what Google is. And my fear is that it's going to be hard to have homegrown talent and to stand out there.
I think that's always, though, the case with anything alternative. It just is. Like, there's mainstream whatever. And yeah, you could get big fast. You could get big fast, or, everybody comes from there. But the whole thing about being alternative is that it's not mainstream.
I don't think that's true. I mean, like, I understand your point, but I'll give you an example. When I was playing on all of the different alt tags, I had huge early success with BitChute. Problem is BitChute doesn't pay their creators for anything. Like I guess they're struggling to keep the doors open, whereas we get ad revenue from.
Right. I mean, I would still consider BitChute alt tech in the sense that it's not mainstream.
Right, but I'm saying because there's actually fewer people producing content from there, you actually get a following faster.
Sure.
So there are, like, Rumble specifically in the way they're set up really does cater towards if you have someone that you know is on the platform, you search them, you subscribe, and you watch videos based upon your feed.
Mm-hmm.
But discovery
is very poor.
Is very poor and very low. So, it's really come down to, and here's the other part of this that I don't like, is the things that are really missing from a user experience with Rumble is, one, they do not have their own editor. Like YouTube, you can upload your raw content and edit it in YouTube.
Sure.
But again, like, I was looking at that as a potential of, like, uploading content to YouTube and then trying to export it out to then upload it to Rumble, and that was a problem.
Right.
And then Rumble has a thing where they'll download your videos and re-upload them from YouTube, but there is such a delay between, like, when you upload to YouTube to when Rumble will get around to, like, bringing it over.
Oh, because it's on there. So basically, it's on Rumble's queue.
Mm-hmm.
And because you don't have access to Rumble's queue, like their lineup, you don't know if you're first or 31st or 101st.
I mean, you're hundreds of thousands down.
Exactly. But my point is still, it's an unknown. Like,
right.
You don't know how big the queue is or where your place is.
Typically, what I've seen online is weeks to almost a month.
Oh, that's awful.
Yes.
I mean, I'm okay with a couple of hours. Like, if it's within 24 hours of my click...
It's weeks.
That's insane.
So that's my point. Like, letting them do it is a problem. The uploading thing being you can't do anything else on your phone. I feel like if you could just have the upload function be in the background, 90% of my complaints go away. Having, a curated list of things, or at least, like, even if you're not going to do things like, go through your search data in the past, just being able to have things like interests.
Well, just because they're not tracking your data doesn't mean that they can't track video data. Like, it totally makes sense to me that they should be able to curate gardening videos. They're not tracking the users.
Right.
I mean, all of those videos should be marked as gardening, so Rumble should be able to say, hey, like, these are all the gardening videos.
Well, here's my point on that, is that, so, like, let's say, hypothetically, that I liked video games, specifically NES games, like I'm a old school gamer. I should be able to put that as a hobby so that it curates things that are related to that.
Right.
For my, like, curated list so that I'm not getting gardening videos.
Right.
Or I should be able to see, like, not interested in this. This doesn't meet my whatever. So things get more curated, even if they're not looking at my, like, files, just on my user interactions with the thing. So, like, if I, even if I don't have to, select, like, I'm interested in these 5 things, they could just look at, like, what I've been watching and be like, you would probably like this.
Right. I mean, it's a slippery slope, though. Like, if you have a user-initiated data transfer, then that, to me, makes sense. But I think the point of Rumble is that they're like, we're not going to look at your data. So, like, if you want to tell us you're interested in NES and you want to tell us you're not interested in gardening, you're more than welcome.
Right.
But I'm not going to look at what you don't tell me.
Sure.
It's a slippery slope because, once you start saying, Rumble, curate my feed, it gets very close to YouTube.
I don't think that that's necessarily true, because the issue that most people have with YouTube is the censorship. I mean, there's
That's
little
true.
things here and there. Like, I've heard people say that Rumble, the video bitrate quality is better, and I'm not going to debate that because I haven't researched it. I just heard that as a general statement. But I will tell you that, like, in terms of being able to accept all codecs and all the things, YouTube is far superior. They will take anything. they are just a dirty girl. They don't really have standards.
Sure. And I don't think the average user cares.
I don't either.
Like, let's just be honest. The average user is not gonna really look at a video and say, "What's the bit rate and how many frames per second was this shot in?"
Because here's the thing. Like, I hear a lot of people think, 4K quality, and people can tell. Here's the problem with that: is most people watch videos on their phone, and their phones are usually 720, if not 480. So, like, the idea that you're going to tell downsampled quality, I mean, just get the fuck out of here.
Well, I had this conversation with my mom, very specifically, because my mom asked me, like, why her Google Drive was filling up so quickly. And I was like, well, because your photos are so large. I was like, you can get by with better or medium quality. And she was like affronted. Why would I ever downgrade the quality of my photos? And I was like, you realize that you couldn't print these photos in the quality that you're thinking you're shooting in. Like, if you're going to print a 3x5 at Walgreens, like, trust me, you don't need this in a 4K file format. Like,
4K is only 12 megapixels, but anywho.
Regardless, my point is, like, again, for the layman, like my mom or myself, you don't need to store everything at its highest quality.
I mean, here's the thing that always got me when I used to work in product photos. People were wanting to post to Amazon, to their website, to whatever, right? So you're shooting product photos and advertisement stuff. And people would always want these huge files because they were like, I want to see the detail in my thing. Here's the thing. Amazon has like file size limits.
Right.
Like it would be unreasonable for them to process, like, if every item had these huge files as the,
And that's my point. Like, if you're going to send something to Walgreens as a 15 gig whatever, Walgreens would be like, hold up. Like, no. I'm not going to print this. I'm not even going to accept the file format, but I'm like, that's already dumb. But then you want me to print it? Like, no, don't be stupid.
Right.
And so that's why I was like, Mom, just downgrade your photos. It'll be fine.
Right.
You won't notice. I promise.
Well, it's funny. I had one client who wanted to do a website at, like, I want to say 50 megapixel files for all their pictures. And, like, so I'm like, okay, your funeral, dude. Like, I uploaded all the things. I, like, paid a lot of money to even get a service that would handle 50 megapixel style. And then, like, they get to the thing, right? Like, you get the website done. And it was the slowest loading thing. Like, nobody could
People don't even realize. They're like, I want the highest quality. I want the biggest whatever. And I'm like, you realize this is going to load slow as shit.
Right.
Like,
there's a reason why Amazon has lower file sizes, because they want Amazon to run smoothly.
Right.
Because here's the thing, like, it would run slow having the best internet on earth. But here's the thing, like, there's parts of the country that are still in dial-up. I'm not saying that to be shitty, but, like...
Well, I mean, we live in an area where we go too far in one direction and our cell phones just die.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah, I mean, you're behind a hill and there's no reception. Like, it is what it is. But, yeah, this idea that every place is New York and LA. Yeah. And it's like, if you...
Everybody has Google Fiber.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So... Yeah, I feel like this is just one of those things where, like, I feel like 720 is enough.
It's fine.
And I feel like this video is going to, like, appeal to no one but other video creators.
Sure.
But...
it's a very angst for video creators where they're like, I want it to have a certain look, I want it to have a certain whatever, a certain aesthetic, because, like, frame rates, change the aesthetic, and maybe a moviegoer might be able to tell, like, a weirdness.
When there's movement and, like, how the whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's the Lord of the Rings thing. Like, when Lord of the Rings, not Hobbit, I think it was.
It went to 60 frames.
Yeah, and, like, moviegoers were like, this is giving me nausea. Like, this is a weird thing. But nobody knew. Why? Like, the layman, nobody knew why it was, like, a weird feeling. Except for movie people who are like, frame rate.
Well, I mean, here's the weird part about this. Like, so this gets weird. So the frame rates initially were 24 frames a second, and they found that because like early on, the most expensive part of a movie tended to be the film itself. Like film is expensive, it still is. So like when you look at like the early days of film, you were paying a fair amount of money for the reel.
Right, the actual hard product, like
Right.
the film that it was produced on.
Correct. So they kept experimenting to see what is the fewest amount of frames per second we can get away with.
Sure.
So before it gets glitchy, because the eye actually sees things at 30 frames a second or 30 images a second. You can't process more than that. Like there's people who are outliers, I know, but like biologically, as a general statement,
Sure.
people see at 30 frames a second. So they found they could get down to 24, which is what movies are shot on. Because again, by cutting out those 6 frames per second, that's saving frames that you have to pay for.
Right.
But also, it kind of has a weird ghost look to it, where like we fill in the blanks of whatever, and it's a very like weird.
It's the surreal
cerebral,
feeling.
It's the surreality of.
And that's the appeal of movies, is that they're not hyper realistic.
Right. Whereas when you look at television, which has to be at 30 frames a second, which is exactly what our eyes are, you get weird, like it just kind of looks too real, like it just looks like they're in the room.
Yeah, it's the soap opera look where you're
Right.
like, ugh, this is like I'm looking at my actual aunt in her actual living room, and
There's no allusion to it whatsoever.
Yeah, like you almost want to like pull back from the TV where you're like, ugh.
But it's also weird in the sense that the reason why it's at 30 has nothing to do with because our eyes are 30. It has to do with the fact that your like electricity pulsates at 30 times a second.
Okay, so it's a synchronicity thing.
Right. So like you can't change the thing faster than like every time it just creates, every time it pulses you get a new.
Yeah. Like it is what it is. This
Right.
is a static fact.
Right. I mean, which is why you have NTSC, which is 30 frames a second pulsing, and PAL, which is based upon current. So like in Europe they use PAL, so it's at 25 pulses a second. So they have to reformat everything to 25 frames a second in PAL countries. Oh my god, it is. I've never worked in a PAL country before, but I've heard it's just
annoying
as hell.
Sure.
It's also weird if you ever are shooting something in 24 frames a second and you have to get a like screen,
Right.
because it pulses.
Well, that's why you get, if anybody's ever, and I'm sure everybody has,
Right.
where you're trying to take a picture of your computer screen or like a digital readout,
Sure.
like on your car, and you're trying to send it as a picture to somebody, and you get the lines.
Yeah,
And you're like, why do I get the lines? That's why,
Yeah.
because the frame rates are different.
Right, so like in movies, what they used to do when they had film days is they had to specially curate electricity that would pulsate at 24 frames a second, and then get televisions and computer monitors that would also pulsate at that time. It was a whole process.
Yeah.
Like it was like the idea that like you have a television in the background of a movie.
And that's why you don't generally. Like that's why one of those kind of things that moviegoers, like real movie fanatics, I think I've talked to you about this, is like searching for running televisions in the background that are actually running like real movies.
Right.
And that's like a whole thing like that movie people do where they're like, I found one. Did you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it like for the people who put like there's no way that's an accident or just running, because there's so much work that had to go in.
So much work. Like finding it is like a treasure, because you're like, oh my gosh, somebody really did this and I had to put a lot of work, and it's in the movie for 2 seconds.
Yeah. So I feel like we buried our lead a little bit with talking about that, because that made me feel better. I don't know if it made anybody else feel better. But the two things that we wanted to actually talk about that might be interesting to someone other than like us.
Other than other rumblers that are not, finding
their... But there's one, a gene that I didn't know I had, but totally makes sense now, which is apparently I can't black out from drinking. So, like, this is kind of I don't know if it's newly found out or just kind of being disseminated recently.
I don't know.
I'm not sure when it came out, but I know when I heard about it was in the last year or so.
Yeah, I mean, the short form TikTok version videos has been really interesting about getting tidbits of information like that out.
Right.
Because it just is.
Right. So apparently there's a small percentage of the population of Earth that cannot black out, and it's typically Nordic genes. I'm like, here it is. Like
yeah, they nicknamed it the Viking gene.
Sure.
Yeah.
But you can't, no matter how much you drink, you won't black out. So I've never blacked out before, and in the back of my head, I'm like, I guess I just never drank enough. Like, I've always been responsible.
I really love that was your conclusion, that you were like, clearly I haven't drank enough, so I'm going to just really, because you know that where that leads to is that in the moment you're like, I'm really going to drink properly today, and like push the limit, and really like see if I could black out. Like, that's where that logic stream goes.
Not really as much as you would think. Because, like, I mean, like, look, we all did stupid shit drinking when we were younger.
Yes.
Especially before YouTube and, like, video phones.
Oh, God. Before you could be recorded. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why the older generation is like, if there's no video...
Bullet dodge. Didn't happen. Yeah.
Didn't happen.
But when I think about that stuff, I remember every second of me being a complete fool and idiot. Yeah. Like I was, it's not that I couldn't get drunk. It's just that, like, I remembered it and was cognizant as it was happening, and I was making a bad decision, and sometimes I was even cognizant that it was a bad decision.
And that's such a surreal feeling, knowing that you're making a bad decision, and you're like, yeah, fuck it, it'll be fine, and you're like, it really won't be, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah. And then, like when you wake up the next day and everyone's mad at you, and you know exactly why.
Oh yeah, you're like, I'm aware. I'm gonna get my coffee. Yell at me in 5 minutes. I'm totally aware of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, like, I specifically remember. I think it ended a relation. I mean, we broke up shortly thereafter, but I'm pretty sure she just couldn't live with me after what I did, which was just. Like, I don't think I ever vomited so much and on so many nice pieces of furniture.
You went full, like, cat vomit where it was just like...
Oh my God. Yeah, just like everywhere. And then, like, you know, she kept trying to get me into the shower.
Sure.
To whatever. And then, like, I would, like, lay down in the shower and she'd hose me off. And, like, I was naked in the shower, and then, like, I'd, like, take a little nap and wake up in the shower naked and then start. I couldn't stand up. Like, I was too drunk to, like, stand. So, like, I was crawling around naked, covered in vomit and wet, screaming, I'm a leprechaun, I'm a leprechaun.
Oh, God. Because you, in your 6 foot plus frame, absolutely.
I mean, if I'm crawling, I'm a leprechaun.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. Golly.
So anyways, like, and I would just remember chasing her and her party guests naked.
Oh my gosh.
Screaming that I was a leprechaun.
And nobody is large enough to, like, do anything to stop you.
No. I mean, most of these friends are female.
Yeah. I mean, like...
And here's the thing, like, there was nothing sexual about it. I just, like, I'm not wearing
drunk.
clothes. Yeah, I'm drunk and I didn't have clothes. Like, whatever.
I mean, anytime that not the excuse, but the explanation is I'm drunk, I mean, no further explanation needed. Like,
right. Bad choices were made.
Bad choices were made.
But, like, the thing is I woke up in the shower and she was mad at me and I knew exactly why. Like, and that's the thing, is, like... But, like, I feel like that was almost like a low point because, like... I don't want to do that again because everyone's mad at me, and I really felt shame.
Sure.
The next day. So, like, I feel like it's actually staved off drinking.
Sure, because, well, you have a stopgap. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, if I drink more than this point, I'm really going to make decisions that I'm going to regret. Uh-huh. And so... You know, though, you're aware of that point. Whereas when you can black out...
Right.
You're like, I don't remember being an ass... And I know that I might have drank up to this point, but, like, at that point, you're already inebriated and can no longer make good decisions. So there's no value add to it.
Right. And I feel like, but here's the thing, when you have people, and we have people who have substance abuse issues in our lives, both of us, we're not going to, like, get into details.
Sure. I mean, close family members, in the sense that it's close enough to be frequent and painful
Yes.
interactions.
Right. And when you talk to those people and you try and explain to them that this is hurtful and this is hurting themselves and hurting others.
And that they don't remember. You're like, look, I've seen you and you don't remember. And they're like, well.
Right. And like realizing that in my gene, because like I remember, you know, it's like it just kind of dawned on me that if you do black out, if you have the blackoutness of it, your memory then is, I was having fun. Mm-hmm. Then I woke up the next day. And I was maybe, and like the worst thing that you can remember is I was maybe sick. Or I was maybe...
Well, here's the story, right? Uh-huh. So generally speaking, I'm the designated driver or the designated person. So, and I have close enough family members that by the time that I was 22, 23, I really had just decided I don't really want to drink anymore.
Sure.
And it wasn't because of a personal experience. It was really because I had seen other people and I was like, I'm just not interested. And so this story actually happened rather recently. So it was all adults, like 4 or 5 of us. And I don't know, maybe like 2, 3 in the morning, one adult decides, you know what, I'm tired, I have work or obligations tomorrow, I'm going to go to bed, right? So they go to bed, no issues. The other 2 adults, plus myself, continue. I'm not drinking, I don't drink. So the other 2 adults are drinking, and they get into a very silly argument about clothing. And really what it comes down to is one adult is telling the other one, did you do the laundry? Because I'm very concerned about whether or not I have enough underclothes for tomorrow. And the other adult is like, I don't remember. Oh, yes, I did. And she's kind of like ruminating about it. And then she's like, oh my gosh, freaks out. I put your underwear with the adult's underwear who went to sleep. And she's just very frantic about these underclothes being not in her possession. That she's afraid that this other adult is going to wear them, which I'm hilariously cracking up because I'm like, there's no grown adult man who is going to put on somebody else's underwear.
But yeah, it's fine.
And be like, oh, it's fine. These are my underwear. Like, I'm just rolling and just absolutely dying laughing. The adult who's sleeping, an adult man, gets up, is so affronted because he's being accused of theft, decides to leave at this point, maybe 3, 4 in the morning, and is angry, drunk, packing, and leaves in a huff. And the other 2 are like, you can't be drunk driving and whatever. And one of them's like, let the asshole go, whatever. So I forget about it. I mean, this is stupid. I go to bed at 5 in the morning, whatever. Quite literally, for 2 weeks, these 3 adults, without me in the conversation, they have their own group chat, are arguing about whether or not he was accused of theft and that he doesn't want to come back because he's offended and how dare he be accused by a family member of theft. And it just keeps going. So then the other 2 adults are just kind of ruminating, and I walk into the room and they're like, were you there that night? And I'm like,
were you there?
As a matter of fact, I was there. I was there the entire night, saw the whole thing. And they're like, did we accuse him of theft? And I was like, no, you didn't accuse him of theft. And he's like, I didn't think we would accuse him of theft. Literally takes me about 30 minutes later to recall the underwear gate as it would happen. And then I tell the 2 other adults, this is what you guys were concerned with. This is what actually happened. This is what he probably heard and understood. This is all about drunken idiocy.
Sure.
And so they're like, oh, okay, so bullet dodged. But in my, I'm trying to say, don't you guys realize though that how big of a problem this is? You offended somebody to such an extent that they left in a drunken, angry state put themselves and others at danger because they were not okay to drive.
Sure.
You two don't even remember that I was there. Like, that's an entire party that now doesn't exist in your memory.
Right.
Like, you accused somebody of something, you can't defend yourself.
Right.
Like, if something bad had happened, if somebody had been injured, you wouldn't be able to explain the situation.
Right.
Like,
I mean, I think when I hear things like that, I mean, I feel like this is a very silly story.
it is very silly in the sense that there was zero repercussions.
Right, but like at the same time, like if you made a more serious accusation and like sometimes relationships end, I feel like what ends up happening with people who are drunks is they are so self-assured that they did nothing wrong when they have no reason to.
Right.
But because you're doing something with memory, you then get to kind of choose your own adventure on what you did or didn't do and what reality is.
Right. Well, in this case, they were like, well, we've never accused you of theft. And I'm like, well, as a matter of fact, you kind of did. Like,
right.
You were accusing him of potentially stealing your undergarments, which is weird. That's stupid. Again, like, this example is very silly. But, like, we're talking about humans, right? So what if he had said, you stole my jewelry, you stole my money, you stole my firearms, you stole my whatever.
What if they acted on it and then it turns into a violent situation?
Yeah, like what if you're like, hey, you stole, $500 that I had, now I demand that you pay it back, when in reality you lost it. You know what I mean? And now this guy's like, what the hell, bro? Like, we're going to end a relationship or a family feud is going to happen because
you got drunk.
You got drunk, I got drunk, she got drunk, and the only sober party we don't remember was there.
Right.
So now we've got this thing, and nobody can say anything about it other than, this is very, to me, a he said, she said family feud that it goes unresolved forever.
I mean, I'm just trying to think back to one particular situation because this is fairly new information to me about the
underwear gate.
No, about the blacking out.
Oh, the blacking out.
Because like I said, to me, I've never blacked out my whole life. I just kind of assumed that while I have a better tolerance than most,
you just have a high tolerance.
That if I can drink heavily and not black out, then the average person probably doesn't black out every time they drink either. Like that was just kind of my logic because, in life, generally what you do is you project what's true for you onto others.
You assume you're the norm. That all people do it.
Right.
All people assume I'm an amalgamation of the norm, so
what I found is I'm the least normal person ever. Like, everything about me is like, you're part of the 0.1%, whatever it is. Good, like, it's not always the good.
Right.
Like, I'm not saying, like,
you're particularly particular.
Yes, like you have all this weird shit about you and nothing is quite normal. But because I projected that, I always just kind of assumed that, the blackout drunks are the people who just, downed a bottle of tequila in 5 minutes and,
right.
whatever. And then you have the certain types of people, and typically it's genetic, family and racial things, where you just can't handle liquor. Like, there's certain
you take one sip and done.
Yeah, and you're blackout. And it's like, okay, that person shouldn't drink.
Sure.
But, the average person, not everyone's like that. Very few people are actually in that category of, don't even give them a beer. They're Well,
I would assume that it's the same. I mean, we've talked about, this podcast, I feel like we've talked about the bell curve frequently. I would assume that it's the same amount of people who don't black out, or the same amount of people who black out immediately.
Right. I mean, that... I don't know. I feel like that's weird logic. I'm not saying it's untrue. I just... in the averages of the universe, sure, I'll allow it.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't scientific, sure. Whatever. But my point is I remember there was this case when I was in the military that a girl accused... So, I gotta preface some of this. So, there was this girl, and, it was in the barracks fairly early on, and she was higher ranking, and literally every time she took a sip of alcohol, she became a hoe. And I'm not trying to say this to be whatever.
I mean, it's the tequila made my clothes come off.
Right. But she, literally, she'd have one drink, and then she'd just be marching up and down the barracks hallway, who wants to fuck me? That was her thing. Every single weekend.
And I'm sure it becomes one of those identity things where you're like, I know what I want to do this weekend. I'm going to buy one beer for her.
I'm sure somebody did.
Yes.
Sometimes. But, no, I don't think anybody took her up on it. And, like, I was...
Really?
Well, not that I knew of. I mean, fuck, I'm like, not, like, policing her...
Oh, sure.
Her room.
Right.
I mean, I was in a relationship at the time, so I never did anything.
Right.
But, like, and not to say that she didn't try. Like, she tried with everybody.
Sure.
But, regardless, I'm not trying to, like, cast aspersions, but... So, one time, she ended up having a threesome with two guys.
Okay.
So, one of the dudes was a friend of mine, a good guy, and the other guy was a total douche. He was married, he was just,
so he's married and sleeping with her, so he's cheating.
He's cheating, but he's just, like, one of the douchiest dudes.
So he's an asshole. So
he's like, a huge asshole.
Okay.
So, like, they do the thing. And the asshole leaves, I guess, after the act. And the other dude is drunk, too.
Sure.
And wakes up next to her. They have breakfast together. Seemed like things were going well, at least from his standpoint.
Sure.
He told. And, again, this is a guy I believe.
Right.
So asshole guy tells everyone what a whore she is because she fucked two dudes.
Sure.
So she gets totally embarrassed
Sure.
by this much information coming out. So she files rape against both guys. So, I
mean, it's one of those things where I can see why she did it. Mm-hmm. In the sense that you can't accuse asshole without accusing good guy.
Right.
Because then it turns into, well, good guy was there. Mm-hmm. Did good guy allow asshole? It begs more questions.
I mean...
Right? And so I'm not saying that what she did was right. I'm just saying, that was a shitty thing to do.
Right.
I can see why she did it, but also that was a shitty thing to do.
Well, I mean, here's my thing when I think back to that situation in this, is in the back, prior to this, the idea of blacking out, because I saw how much it took her to get to the super horny phase, and I'm not trying to say this to be, disparaging, but in my mind, if you have 2 or 3 drinks, the drinks make you horny, they don't make you black out.
I can see your logic, because you're projecting your norm onto her, so you're like, there's no way that this could be true, because my norm...
I can drink...
My assumed norm.
I mean, I could drink 2 bottles of whiskey in a night and be fine. I could, have 30 beers and half a bottle of whiskey and be fine. And, I'm not saying driving fine, but, functional.
Well,
and,
not blackout.
Not blackout, cognizant, not sick, talking to people, maybe able to hook up, functional. And, she has 3... And she gets horny.
Yeah.
So, to me, she just got horny when she got, a little tipsy. I'm not thinking, she's now in an altered state and, she's now the animal part of her brain and not her cognitive, functional part.
And that's the part where the whole conversation of consent really fucks with me. Mm-hmm. Because consent... currently has been a huge topic of, if she's drunk, she can't consent. Right? But here's my thing. Adults go to bars. Mm-hmm. That's imperatively true. Mm-hmm. Right? Adults also hook up at bars.
Yes.
Also imperatively true.
Correct.
So the idea that I would go to a bar, and let's assume I'm single and you're single. Mm-hmm. The idea that I'm going to go to a bar and that you're going to watch me for hours to make sure that I don't consume alcohol because I'm now putting you in a position where you have to be responsible for my alcohol intake because you have to assume that I am cognizant enough to consent. So the idea that we are both going to go to a bar as single adults, not knowing each other, and that you're going to have to watch me over a period of hours, or that you might have to take me to Denny's after the bar to sober me up to make sure. Because again, to your point, I don't know if she's tipsy, drunk, or blackout after one drink or 9 drinks. I just met her at the bar.
Right.
I don't know how much she drank. She seemed and appeared fine.
Right. That's my whole point. And I remember having a conversation with a police officer about this very thing because they, when you change duty stations, a lot of times they'll have a legal team and they'll explain the laws of that state. And I don't remember which state this is because I went to a bunch of different briefings. But one of them had particularly stupid rape laws. Like, it was like, you know, I mean, just the level of consent for every aspect was redonkulous. You know?
Yeah.
So, like, you know, you could get, like they were very particular. And they were like, so you can be making out with a chick, she can take your pants off, she can take her pants off, she can be jerking your dick off, and then put it next to her pussy. But then if you thrust without asking permission, you're done. And I'm like, what, huh? What, huh?
Yeah, because you're leading somebody on.
Right.
Because really what that sounds like is trappy trap. This is a trappy trap.
Right.
Like, what you're doing is you're putting another human being in a position where
they retroactively can fuck you.
Yeah, like, I'm going to get you 99% of the way there and assume that you're going to take the 1%. And as soon as you take the 1%, I've got you.
I didn't ask for that.
I didn't ask for that.
Yeah.
Like, that to me, that's a trappy trap.
Yes. Yeah, and the fact that, like, that particular state laws was going there to, quote unquote, protect victims, like, you're creating a whole new set of victims, is what you're doing. Like, let's be clear.
Yeah.
But then they had a thing in that same state where if you have one alcoholic beverage, you cannot consent to sex.
Again, that brings me back to the original, like, it's absurd to think that a single man is going to go to a bar and hook up with a woman before she gets to the bar. Like, she's going to walk into the door and he's going to circumvent her before she gets to the bar, and he's going to say, hey, you want to hook up?
Right.
But don't drink yet because we have to leave right now. Like, you cannot drink.
Right.
Like, you came to an establishment for a purpose.
Or you made at the bar and you, like, give a girl a breathalyzer first before anything.
Yeah, like, you have to... Are you going to walk up to her and be like, are you the designated driver for your group? And have you had even one drink? Because if you've had one drink... You can't consent
to anything for the rest of the night.
Like...
That's a silly idea. And yet, I understand the idea of getting a girl drunk to where you think she can't consent as being awful. Like, you know, date, rape, drugs, all of those things. Like, that's not what we're talking about, but it gets into a weird gray area. So I remember talking to this police officer trying to get details. Because I'm like, I need to understand this.
Right. So explain this to me like I'm 5.
Explain this to me like I'm 5. Like, I need details here. So I was like, so let's say, you know, I'm going to a bar, and I have a drink and the girl has a drink, right? I'm fully cognizant, she's fully cognizant. The next day, because she had the one beer, she can claim rape. And he said, yes, absolutely. So it doesn't matter that she's impaired, really, as long as there was any alcohol. He's like, absolutely. But it's like, but we have both had a beer. Could I say she raped me? But,
no.
And he's like, yes.
Oh.
And I'm like, so let's say, hypothetically, you know, we both drink, we both have sex, that we both were consenting to in the moment, and then we both want to file rape charges the next day, who wins? Who wins? And he said, whoever files first.
Oh, God.
That was his answer.
So what you're telling me is it behooves me to have an alarm clock on...
Right. So, like in the back of my head, I'm just thinking, like, do I want to be the world's biggest dick? And every time I hook up at a bar, I go straight to the police because I don't want this to happen to me. So better them than me.
Sure.
And I file rape charges.
Basically, it's like you go to the police office, police station, and you're like, look, just give me a stack. Of rape forms.
Right.
Because I'm going to pre-fill my information, and then when I meet said girl at the bar, I'm going to make sure that I get the minimal information to identify her on this document.
So that I can file first.
For every time.
Every time, because I can't afford for her to file first once.
Right. And again, this isn't like you're trying. Like, we're definitely not going down the road of, like, I'm a serial rapist. Like, no, but this is the dumb shit of, like...
Right.
I'm acting in all good conscience
Right.
under the circumstances. I understand that consenting adults go to a bar to drink, and that after they drink, they make decisions.
Right, and like I've never gone after a girl who was sloppy ever.
Sure.
Just ever. But like there was one time in my youth that I went to a bar where I think I even met them before going to the bar. And like we went on a date and we went to a bar.
Sure.
And we didn't drink that much. Like we had 2 or 3 drinks. And like it got her going. Went home, did our thing, and like she slept over, and the next day she was very uncomfortable. And she left. And I remember like I really liked her and I thought we had a good time that night, even before going home. And like trying to reach out, and it was just like, you are the world's biggest piece of shit. And like now, like thinking about that from the perspective of like people can black out at any point.
So she, at that point, could assume the worst. Right. Because she has no idea what actually happened.
Right. If she blacked out after drink 1, like assume that she's like one of those early blackout people.
Right.
She's having fun at the bar. She has 1 drink. She blacks out. She wakes up in my bed the next day.
What's the horror movie, the birthday movie that we just watched?
Oh, Happy Death Day.
Yeah, so it's the Happy Death Day thing, where she wakes up at the guy's bedroom, and on the very first time that she wakes up, she really thinks that they had sex, and she's pissed. She's so mad at him, and he's like, we didn't even do anything. Why are you mad at me?
Right.
Like, I saved you.
Well, that's the modern narrative, though, because he would be a douchebag if they had sex, but here's the thing. I would imagine that happens to the same proportion of guys who hook up and don't remember. So, like, I mean, you'd have to assume, like, in the bell curve that we were just talking about, that if it happens to one, it happens to the other. Like, it's never happened to me, and I've never purposefully been predatory about it. But, again, like, I think back to that one girl, and I never thought about it as blackout, because, again, I was with her all night. I know how much she drank. It was not an obscene amount. Like, she did not get... Hammered by any means. Like, she had 3 beers over, like, 2.5 hours. Like, this is not, like... what I would consider to be like binge drinking, blackout, drunk. However, like hearing about blackoutness as a,
condition.
As a condition that some people are conditioned for, it now makes me wonder, like, because it never made sense why she freaked out the next day.
Sure.
And
again, because if you're projecting your norm,
right,
you're thinking... like, you remember everything.
Right.
So, why are you mad at me?
And like, we had fun, and, like all the things, and you were really into me, like...
Yeah, what happened?
Like, there's just a shift here. Like, something happened that I'm not aware of, and now I'm just wondering, like, is it a memory thing?
I mean, I can see that, because, well, like I said, I have quite a few family members who drink frequently and heavily.
Right.
And I remember having this conversation with said family member where I was like... when do you not remember? Like, explain this to me, again, like, explain this to me like I'm 5. Like, when do you not remember? And the way they said it was, it's like I have a video camera in my head. Like the old style cameras with the reels, and that you, like, whatever.
The cassette tapes, yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, it's like somebody's operating the camera, right? And they're turning the film. And then all of a sudden, like, the film just, the film on the reel just finishes. And now it's just like flapping. So after that, like...
stuff happened, but whatever.
It didn't get captured. It didn't get captured on my internal recorder. And so I remember, like, almost doing like a scientific inquiry, like, interview where I'm like, tell me when specifically you don't remember, right? And we did this over like a course of like months, years, really. And so now, when they're... tape recorder is now like the joke we have between ourselves, where I'm like, your tape recorder's done.
Right.
Like, now I can tell in real time when the blackout happens. And it's a weird...
in everyone, or just in the people you're familiar with?
No. Just in that singular person.
Okay.
But only because I have that relationship where I'm like, explain this to me like I'm 5. Let's actually, like, interview, because I'm really curious about it. And... It's also really interesting because I didn't do it in a derogatory way. Like, I wasn't trying to be ugly about it, but I was just really curious. Like, I need to just understand, like, when do you not remember? Like, from from a curiosity standpoint, like, how do you... because from my perspective, sitting across the table from you, you're jovial, you're loquacious, you are lucid, you are like your logic sets are kind of weird, but you're pretty logical. Yeah. So from an outside perspective, it appears that you are drunk, but not blackout. Sure. Because when you assume blackout, you're thinking bumbling, sloppy. Stumbling, sloppy, like leaning over, you know. Mm-hmm. And this particular individual, it has never been like that.
Sure.
And so now in real time, I can actually identify. It's like just a look and a feel and whatever. I'm like, your tape recorder is done. Yeah, it's just.
Sure.
Yeah, and so, but I'm wondering. You know, with other people though, you don't have that kind of close relationship with everybody. And actually what's really interesting about that particular individual is their partner also drinks heavily, and I can never tell. Never. I've known them my whole life, can never tell when they're drunk, when their tape recorder is run out, you know, to use the same euphemism.
Sure.
Like, and I've known them the same amount of time. I've had the same amount of conversations with them. Can't tell worth a flip.
Sure, and like I'm just thinking about this from, you know, dating dynamics.
Yeah.
What is the like realistic?
Well, what's see? My thing is, whenever you put the expectation on the second party,
right,
you're setting someone up for failure. Sure. Because like to use your. You know, that particular state where it's like the one drink rule. I mean, again, you're now making somebody else responsible
for knowing if you've had a drink that day.
For a third party's decision. That to me is, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So, you know, you walk into a bar and you shoot somebody at the bar, but it's my fault for being at the bar because I should have known that you were going to walk in with a gun? Like, how does me getting shot my fault because I was supposed to preemptively know that a crime was going to be committed?
Sure.
Like, that to me is what this sounds like, because it's like, how am I'm the one getting charged for rape because I didn't watch you and know that you had a drink an hour ago?
Right. And I mean, that's my whole point, is that like if you accept the premise, and I'm not 100% sure that I do, I'm just thinking back to people, you know,
sure,
anecdotally, assuming that there are people, and I'm going to also assume in terms of body mass and the way that alcohol metabolizes, that this is majority women.
And
maybe that's a weird assumption. Maybe that's a wrong assumption. But maybe it comes from the fact of like.
Well, I think it's a media assumption, because I was thinking about this, and anytime that you see like that kind of dynamic in TV, like they had it on The Big Bang Theory, where Penny sleeps with Raj. Raj remembers. Penny doesn't.
Right.
And anytime that I think about it in Friends or in
just social
they
context,
always have the woman black out. And to your bell curve example, I would assume that the same amount of men black out as the amount of women, but that's not what's being portrayed. What's being portrayed is that it's always the woman who blacks out,
and that the men are intentionally predatory for having done so, because the media perception is always the female was so drunk and obvious and able to take care of herself, and then you have a male who is kind of waiting in the wings for her to get too sloppy to say no.
Right.
And from, you know, let's assume that the one girl that I have been with did get blackout. And again, like, this isn't something that was ever communicated to me. And again, it's
also years, you know, more than a decades removed.
Right.
Like, who knows? But
yeah,
sure.
I'd say 15 years ago-ish. But assuming that she did get blackout, like, there was no deviation in behavior of a before and after that I could have told. I mean, yes, there was a couple of drinks there, and she seemed to be getting more turned on as the night went on, but like, from my perspective, I assumed what was making her turned on was me and flirting and doing all of the date things.
Right, because you're
the conversations and whatever. So like, you know, in terms of lucidity or like whatever, there was no moment where I was like, she's sloppy. And it became a rule, not directly after that, but just generally, where the first time I was ever with someone, they cannot have drank.
I mean, I can see that from a humanity standpoint. You know, like as a basic human, you're like, look, I need to make rules to live my life.
Right, but also like to save myself from being accused of something.
Right, because it's just one of those things that, and again, but it makes you responsible for somebody else's behavior.
Right.
Because let's say that you and I are first dating, right? And we're on our very first date, and we go to Olive Garden, right? That's a nice, just generic.
Sure.
But I decide I want to have a glass of wine, right? And you're like, please don't have a glass of wine. Like, at that point, it immediately puts the entire situation awkward. Because either you can decide, let her do her and have the glass of wine.
Right.
But now I have to immediately drop you off. Because I don't want to assume any kind of liability.
Or responsibility. Because,
but then from my perspective, the female, it's, how dare you drop me off immediately after the date? Like, we didn't go bowling. We didn't go whatever. You just, like, what did I do that pissed you off? That you know what I mean? So now I don't want to go on a second date with you, right? And so, again, it's just putting more social awkward.
Right.
Or the alternative is that you tell the woman, can you please not have a glass of wine? Right. Which in this day and age, why are you policing my body?
Right.
I'm allowed to have a glass of wine
if I want to.
If I want to.
But then, like, and then here's the weird thing. If you're the guy and you refuse the girl's advances, then you're prudish and uninterested, and she's going to move on.
Sure. It's a very, like, what did I do to fuck with you? You know what? Screw you.
Right.
Like,
well, you've had a glass of wine, but then she's like, but I'm fine. And it's like, I have no way of knowing
that. Yeah.
You know?
Because that could be I'm drunk, I'm fine.
Right.
And there's no way for you to disprove.
I'm drunk, I'm happy.
Yeah.
And I'm horny, and you're here, but I won't remember it tomorrow or consenting, and I'm, you know, prone to call the police, so fuck off. I mean, like, as the guy, you know, who is generally the person who's going to be held accountable if anything goes awry, that, like...
Yeah.
You know,
I've mentioned this show before. Well, go ahead and finish.
Well, no, like, I feel like the answer is like, in my 20s, you know, I was in the military, I was, you know, I went through some periods where I did things I wasn't whatever, but, like, the real answer is that, like, I feel like, at the very least, know who you're having sex with, like, for real. Like, that's, like, the real way to get around not getting away.
Yeah, don't hook up.
Don't hook up. Like, don't do that at all. Like... You know, make sure there's at least monogamy first. And, like, the general rule that I've, you know, culminated from my own dating life is don't have sex with someone that you wouldn't reasonably be okay if they got pregnant.
I mean, all of those are totally reasonable. I feel like that lesson is not learned until it's too late.
Right.
Like, by and large, most humans...
Like, because I have a couple of, like, close call bullet dodged, I'm like, never again. But most people, they don't, like... internalize that logic.
Yeah, well, again, like, it's a very...
Yeah, fuck it, what's the worst that could happen?
What's the worst that could happen? And even if they're like, she gets pregnant, and you're like, and now, like, the politics of now, it's like, I'll just pay child support. Like... Right. Whatever. But this show, I've mentioned this show before, Upload, on Amazon Prime.
No, not familiar.
I'm aware, it's a sci-fi show. But anyways, what I thought was really interesting is in one of the very first episodes, they have a riff off of Tinder, right? So she's on the riff Tinder. Yeah. And the swipe right or whatever. So she swipes right, the guy comes over, but they both have these body cams. So you have to, per the Upload show logic, you have to put the body cam on your chest, right? And then the other person has to align their face with your body cam and basically press the cam and say, I consent. And then it's reversed, right? So I do it on your body cam, you do it on my body cam, and then I keep my body cam because That's your security. Like, I
Right.
have it on
You know,
record.
it's like the Dave Chappelle, like, here's a contract I need you to sign. Like, you agree to oral. And like,
can you initial here and here?
It's like, I think I brought this story up before, but I had a girl actually tell me that it depends, like she would consent to try something, but could rescind her consent whether or not she liked it.
Retroactively. So
Right.
if she didn't enjoy it after the fact, she could retroactively say, well, I gave consent, didn't like it, so I removed my consent.
Right. And it's like I had a girl tell me like she wanted to do something rough, but then like wasn't sure if she would like it or not, and then further to tell me, well, you know, be careful because if I don't like it, I'm
going to the police.
I'm going to the police. Good and I'm like, why on earth would I ever...
Why would you try?
Why would I ever try? Like, I can't be in control of whether you like something or not.
Right. Well, again, it goes back to putting the responsibility on somebody, not yourself.
Right. And I feel like, here's the thing, is it's like, you know, when I was younger, as I think is true of most people, you have an experimental phase where like, you don't know what you like, you don't know what your sexuality is, you don't know what your whatever is, so you try different things, and sometimes the answer is nope, never again. Sure. But at the same time, like if you consented to it, and I'm saying this is things that I didn't enjoy, at no point would I ever think to try and prosecute the girl because I didn't like the thing that we agreed to try together.
So here's a weird one. I heard this one when I was in college. So this one is weirdly starts non-sexually. So it's like a dojo place, like a kickboxing, MMA dojo place where they're teaching women like self-defense. But the instructors are two men. An older guy, I'd say maybe
50, 60?
Maybe like early 50s, late 40s.
Sure.
And a young dude who's like in his 20s, right? And they're teaching college women how to just self-defense, right? So they have a class, let's insert 6 weeks, right? So one female comes, fit, beautiful, whatever, and she has a crush on the 20-year-old, right? So she's chatting it up. He's not interested. He does this class all the time. This is like a fairly frequent, like there's always the one girl who crushes on the instructor, and he's done it before, right? And he's like, I'm not interested, but I'll flirt with you.
I know where this ends.
I know what this ends. I'll flirt with you and be friendly, but this isn't going anywhere, right? So she asks him, as part of the training thing, they go over chokeholds. And she says, you know what? I want you to I want to know what it feels like for you to choke me out. So he does. Like, not immediately. This is after like 2 or 3, 4 requests where she's like repetitive, and he's like, this isn't really something you do for fun. And she's like, yes, but I want to know like what it feels like, and gives whatever bullshit reason, like I want to make sure I can get out of it, whatever. So the young dude complies, chokes her out. She flips the fuck out. Absolutely just doesn't want to have anything to do with him, is super angry, whatever, and then wants to like follow up with assault charges, but everybody's kind of telling her that doesn't make sense. You're in a dojo type environment, MMA, self-defense, you requested it, you can't really do that. So she throws a big fluster, you know, whatever. And the older guy tells the younger guy, I couldn't tell you this before because you had already refused the offer, but take this as a lesson learned. Never do that. And he's like, why? And he's like, because the reason why she's so angry now is because that was a kink. So you, the guy, was unwillfully used to fulfill a sexual request from a female where he didn't know what he was doing. She asked him to do something, did not properly communicate her intent, didn't like it, then got mad, but couldn't get him on sexual assault charges because that's not what happened. That's not what happened, but that's what her perception was. Right. Because that's what she didn't communicate. And so the older man was like, I hate to tell you this, that's happened before. Where women don't communicate. for whatever reason. So
Sure.
now this 20-year-old is like, I will never, for the rest of forever, touch a female in an MMA dojo type environment. And he's an instructor.
Well, and here's the thing, like, that doesn't serve women, because I know a lot of women who are trying to get into BJJ and things of that nature, and like you have to spar, you have to roll, and in a lot of cases you don't have other women that, because here's the thing, you need someone who's more experienced than you
Sure.
to teach you. Like if you get two newbies and put them together,
Yeah, what are they going to teach each other?
right, like there's really nothing to spar there. Like you need, to learn from someone who's better than you. So like in a lot of these cases, because there's fewer women than men,
Right.
women and men spar all the time, and they go around, and it's nothing sexual. Like
sure.
I came from wrestling. I came from martial arts. Like that's, I've sparred with women before. Like there's nothing, whatever about it. But like the idea that like somebody, because like look, there's inadvertent touching. Like like the number of times that dudes have touched or grabbed or whatever, and like I don't think any of it was
intentional.
Right. It's just that happens. So, I don't know, like,
it goes back to putting the responsibility on somebody, not yourself.
Right.
So now this guy has to assume responsibility for a potentially sexual assault request when he's in an environment where that's not an inherent risk.
Or normal. Like,
right, or normal. And so he's like, so every time a female asks me, can you correct my position? Can you whatever? And now he has to, in the back of his head, think, could I possibly am I the man being used? Because really, he's the one being raped.
Right.
He's being used
to perform sexual act that he didn't consent
to.
I mean, I don't know. I had a friend of mine in high school, and it was his senior year. He was a year above me, and he got a scholarship to be a lineman in football. Mm-hmm. Big dude. He was my size, almost exactly the same dimensions as me. And he was engaged to a girl who graduated the year before him. She was a year older. Mm-hmm. I had known her at school. And he was a virgin, waiting till marriage. Like good Christian dude. Like, whatever. And he, he drank. I wouldn't say he had a problem, but, like, he enjoyed partying.
Sure.
To that degree. So they went to a senior party. He went there. He got drunk. He passed out. Like, he actually passed out from drinking. He woke up from being unconscious drunk to a woman on top of him having sex with him.
Oh.
She was tiny. I want to say about 5 foot even, maybe.
Right,
maybe
and you're 6
pounds.
foot plus.
I'm 6'3". And he was probably 240, solid muscle at the time. And she gave him a disease.
Oh, God.
So he lost his virginity in a rape where he got a disease while he's engaged. And the thing is the girl was fairly attractive in an objective way.
Right. So trying to win a she raped me case.
Right. Like he tried to go to the police and they basically told him, like, there's no district attorney on earth.
Yeah, this is laughable.
That is going to ever take this in front of a jury.
Yeah.
Like, all they have to do is stand you up next to her. She's a beautiful woman. She's attractive.
Yeah.
You're bigger than her. Like,
sucks to suck.
Sucks to suck. It is what it is. And, like, his fiance dumped him because she considered that cheating, which, like.
I mean, yeah, it's one of those, like, mm-hmm. I get it. I get from his perspective, yeah, that fucking sucks.
Right.
But, like, drinking,
mm-hmm.
it just leads to problems. Like, and that's not to say that you and I don't drink. Like, we drink at home occasionally.
Right.
We don't drink outside of home because inherently we would have to drive.
Right.
And neither of us will drive while inebriated in any sense of the word. Not one drop. It's like a not one drop rule.
Right.
And so that's fine. But the idea that you can drink mm-hmm. and not have to be responsible for mm-hmm. potential actions is really what this comes down to. Is I want to be able to drink. I don't want to be held responsible for what I do when I drink.
Right.
Unless it's in my benefit.
Right.
So unless I can accuse somebody else of doing me wrong.
Right.
While I'm drunk.
Right.
But outside of that circumstance,
because we always want to assume the best of ourselves when we're the ones in that situation. So I think it all comes back to that. Yeah, it's a weird thing, like thinking about just what other people's perception of reality is when drinking, because I realistically haven't been with anyone outside of a relationship in a long time. Like a hookup,
I feel like the hookup hoe culture is a very 20s,
right.
And not even like the whole of your 20s. It's like a very young 20s.
Well, for me, it was specifically, I was someone who dated, and I would be in these relationships, and then they would end. I would be broken, and I would have a consolation time.
Sure.
Where I would do whatever to try and feel better. So it is what it is. Like, I went through bad periods. And I did things I'm not necessarily proud of, but at no point was I ever looking for someone to be predatory.
Yeah.
And again, I have, just thinking about that football player, I have his perspective. I never talked to her. I was consoling my friend.
Sure.
So, were they potentially flirting while drinking? Is there a moment where he says he woke up with her on top of her? Did he become cognizant?
Sure. I mean, because the thing about somebody else's experience is you are never inside of their head.
Right.
So they could tell you, I blacked out at the bar. Right? I remember getting into the car. I don't know how I got to the car because the last thing I remember was the bar. And then after that, I remember the apartment. But again, I don't remember how I got from the car to the apartment, how long I was in the car.
Right.
And then there's the other person, right? So me, the designated driver, I'm like, bro, we went to a restaurant. Between the car and the apartment.
We laughed, we went on a long walk.
Yeah, we went to Denny's, we were there for 45 minutes. We then went to the walk on the park for another 45 minutes. You don't remember any of this shit? And realistically, what are you going to do to refute me? Because I could throw in anything at that point and be like, we also went wherever else, and what are you going to do, correct me?
Right, because you don't remember.
Because you don't remember.
And I think that's what it comes down to, is just this subjective idea of because I never had that experience of not remembering, as if I wasn't drunk.
Yeah.
I remember being drunk and doing stupid things while drunk, but I don't remember there's never a period where I don't recall.
Sure.
I got home and I was sick and I threw up for 2 hours. Yep, remember every second. That's one of the reasons
why. Every miserable second of it.
Yeah.
And that's why I never did it again.
Yeah, that's why I don't drink that much anymore. But I remember everything. So I just assumed that was the normal.
Yeah.
And just the idea that there are people who black out immediately is such a scary thought to me, because then it does bring in the idea of what do people remember when you hear about the predominance of rape culture. How many of these rapes are
legitimate?
Well, I mean, because here's the thing: what's legitimate? Because I have no experience of I took a drink and I woke up naked in somebody's bed. I have no experience of how that would feel. I would imagine
it feels really shitty.
It feels really shitty.
That's never happened to me, but I would imagine that anytime you wake up in not your place
with somebody you
don't know,
that's draped on you naked, and you obviously have some sexual whatever, and you don't know what they did, what you didn't do, any of the things, that to me
is terrifying.
And something that I've never come to terms with, because I've never got to that point.
Sure.
And I, took my drinking down because I remember being sick, and I remember,
natural consequences.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's I never want to be a leprechaun again and have people mad at me because I'm chasing them.
Yeah, because I'm acting a fool.
Right. So I just didn't drink that much, or I didn't do it publicly. I mean, I had a little bit of a depression period after my first deployment where I would drink alone to sleep because I was having bad nightmares.
Well, so I feel there are very classic military things. You know what I mean? Coming back after your first deployment and absolutely going on a bender, while I don't necessarily condone it,
right,
totally makes sense to me.
right.
I mean, you're traumatized as fuck, you're young.
Right.
You know, like, sometimes, more often than not, marriages or relationships end
Right,
after a first appointment.
right. So, like, it was right after, like, the divorce. I'm home, alone. Drinking because I can't sleep from nightmares, and I would literally drink a bottle of whiskey a night to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And like it really got to a point where like I needed it to sleep, and I literally had to quit drinking for like 6 or 7 months just because I was afraid. Because I was never an addict in the sense of like I needed it in a like compulsory drinking thing. It was just like I needed it to sleep, and my tolerance was so high I had to drink copious amounts.
Sure.
And I wasn't getting hungover or whatever. It was just, I felt all warm and fuzzy. And yeah, like
you're a large human being and consume a large amount of volume.
Right. So like I would drink a lot of whiskey to feel warm and cuddly so I can fall asleep and not think about bad things. And eventually it was just like look, I'm afraid I might be an alcoholic, so I'm just going to see if I can stop. And then 6 to 9 months later, I was like, I can have a beer and I'm fine. Like I'm not going to fall
off a cliff and go and buy another 24 beers
because I had the one. Right. Like I just needed to deal with my PTSD issues and not have alcohol. But like I said, I've never had that experience of waking up, whatever. And I can just imagine it does put a different perspective of is this where rapes come from? Because when you said a real rape, to me, when I think of rape, I think of overpowering someone, the traditional cliche of hiding out in the parking lot in the dark, and then
yeah, what is it? It's the very definition of non-consent.
Right.
I feel like people have conflated lack of consent with non-consent.
Right.
Non-consent is stop.
No.
I don't want this.
Right.
You are being aggressive.
Right.
I am telling you very distinctly, under no uncertain circumstances, that this is not what I desire.
Right. Like where you would have no reasonable expectation. I remember we had a case where somebody was breaking into people's homes in the area and raping them.
Sure.
While they were asleep. Like breaking into their home, pouncing on them in their sleep as a stranger and forcing sex on them. Obviously rape.
Right.
Nobody's saying that that's good, but that's what I think of when I think of rape. When I think about this from the standpoint of I am now questioning this blackoutness. But then here's the thing, right? I feel like you get that once. Mm-hmm. But if you're a person who blacks out from a beer or a shot or whatever,
do you stop?
Can you reasonably ever drink again?
See, and that's actually something that I was going to talk about, which is I do have one family member whose wife actually told them, love to love you. You cannot drink. Period. I'm not accusing you of being an alcoholic. I'm not telling you anything. From a matter of fact, as your wife, I am telling you, under no uncertain circumstances, you are not allowed to drink because you black out so quickly and you make rash, angry, and sometimes maybe violent. He never beat her. It wasn't like that. It was just that he was unreasonable.
Right.
And she was like, you are unreasonable to such a degree that no one can deal with you.
Yeah.
I can't deal with you. I'm your wife. Your brothers can't deal with you. They're your family. Your children can't, you know what I mean? She's like, so you just can't do it. And not only that, because the family at large has a drinking culture, we need to leave.
Right.
We need to leave. We need to live somewhere not here. Because you can't, as my husband, guarantee that you will not drink when you're with your family. And I, as your wife, cannot control you to such a degree to prevent you from drinking in real time.
Right.
The only thing I can tell you is you're not allowed. And so, using this logic, we need to leave.
Sure.
And from that perspective, when you're in a relationship, as a calm dinner table conversation, imperatively, could the other party understand I can't drink? Because my wife can't control me. Nobody else can control me. I can't be held responsible because I don't remember. I'm inebriated. So I will accept your premise and discontinue drinking. But I think that gives more credit to the human condition than it's worth, because this man...
Because if you don't remember why you're doing the thing, it's hard to like accept it. Because again, if you are blacking out, you're creating your own reality.
He's going based fully on his wife's version of reality.
Sure.
Which is being corroborated by others, but he's not doing it because of his own conviction.
Sure.
He's trusting that his family and his wife has his best interest in mind.
Sure.
And he's making a decision. But again, I think that puts so much pressure on the human condition, because by and large, he's the outset. By and large, most people are like, I can handle it.
Right. And like it's almost like you're looked down upon if you are the person who blacks out at 1.
Right.
Or who can't handle themselves. And I don't know. I'm actually, this is one of those things that like, there's a little bit of research we've done. We have a lot of anecdotal stories between the two of us. But I'm actually curious to hear what other people's are, and like to maybe reframe your own, wild periods and in times that, because, I'm just assuming everybody had their 20s.
I assume that everybody had a hoe phase.
Right, at some point in their life. I mean, like we're settled down now and past that, but at the same time, like we both had one. So I'm actually curious to know, what are people's experience with blacking out, with, that culture like, and what do you think the onus should be on? Like, if a person is acting fine, how much onus should be on the other party to check?
Yeah, I mean, are we all going to the upload culture of, consent body cam?
Right, and I think the answer is yes, that's where leftists want to go, but at the same time, I am also empathetic to the idea of waking up in that state of shock. But at the same time, like, like just thinking from my perspective, like, I met the girl that this happened with at the bar. Like, we were drinking. I think she was fairly drinking when I met her. You
didn't you couldn't have been there before you were there.
Right.
So.
But like the first night was, we just talked, we flirted, hey, here's my number. That's how we set up the date. So then the second time, she drank way less than the first time, and obviously she remembered me well enough from the first time to have called me. Like, sure. I'm trying to use analytical logic, though I have no idea what her perspective was.
Sure. I mean, and there's no way to tell, because clearly she was so upset that she believed the worst.
Right.
Which begs that she's not going to be forthright in what she thinks, because now she's putting herself in a position of, like, I really don't know.
Right.
And I want to? Because the other thing is, do I want to know? If I think the worst, and you tell me something worse than what I thought, then in my mind, I'm like, I never should have fucking asked.
Right.
Right? Like... would she even want to?
I don't think we're in a responsibility culture, and we want to look at experiences, which I'm acknowledging that's a bad experience, but we're saying that I had no responsibility, and everyone else around me should have known me and my personal experience.
I mean, I hate that culture. It's everywhere. It's everybody needs to preemptively know what I desire, what my pronouns are, what my preferences are, what's going to accommodate me, and you should innately and inherently
intuit what you want
prior to me coming in and introducing myself. Before any of that, you should. And I'm like, that takes so much responsibility, like the idea of self-responsibility.
But like, that's my whole point, is like, even if we assume that that's what happened, I can't imagine that's the first time. You know what I mean? So like, here's my thing, and like, I'm projecting myself.
Sure.
If every time I went drinking, I didn't remember, and, because I drink, people hit on you, I wake up in a couple of people's beds that I don't remember, I probably wouldn't drink ever again. Just never.
And that to me is the sad part. Like Happy Death Day, I want to say she walks into her dorm with the roommate, and I want to say the roommate kind of like rather flippantly says like, whose bed did you land in tonight?
Right.
As to like, I mean, if you get to a point where it's a joke,
right?
I mean, how many times has it happened?
Right.
Where you're now
but
joking
we're
about
still
it. Allowing.
Well, here's the thing. The part in the movie is when she assumed he had sex with her, which, let's complete that sentence, like everyone else did.
Like everyone else did.
That she's mad at them, but she's also not pursuing charges.
But she's also continuing the behavior.
Right, but she's also continuing the behavior of herself that put herself in those positions to be blackout. And I'm going to assume, was happy and horny and like forward towards the guy, and then the guy is supposed to intuit what her condition is.
You know what? It also happens in Scream 6. The little girl, the little sister.
Yeah.
They're at the frat party.
Right.
And it's her friends, specifically the black man friend, who is like, she doesn't want to go up with you. And the little sister girl is like, you don't control me, like I can make my own decisions. And they're telling her, you're in no position to make a decision because you've been drinking. And she's like, how dare you try to control my whatever, I want to go up the stairs and do whatever things. And so again, it puts us in this position of, she's not going to take responsibility.
Right.
While her friends are now having to take on her responsibility while she's actively fighting against what they're telling her. Like, this idea of like,
But then here's the other thing is, from the male perspective, you know, like, she's horny, I'm horny, I've been drinking, I'm just as impaired as she is.
Right. But he's going to take the rap.
But he's the one going to take the rap, so I need to be responsible in projecting what you will feel about this tomorrow.
Right.
And that is such a, like, I mean, here's the thing, it's like the answer is you just don't have, like, you don't ever hook up. That's the answer.
Yeah, well, in this case, she puts all of the responsibility on her friends.
Right.
Right? So, again, she's like, I don't want to be responsible, I just want to drink. Mm-hmm. And now it's up to my friends to make sure that I don't do something stupid, even if I fight them. Mm-hmm. So...
Yeah. So, yeah, again, I'm actually curious to hear what other people think, what other people's experiences are, and are there men that black out? Like, I'm actually curious because, like you said, like, you know, as far as the bell curve goes, however, because men have a higher body, like, mass, I wonder if that offsets it at all. Like, I have no idea. Like, this is all theory to me.
Sure.
But I also feel like when you do these sorts of, like, when they do studies on this, how many people answer honestly? You know?
They've actually, I like that when you do studies now, because I've done them in the past, at the end, some of them, not all of them, some of them will ask, did you answer honestly? And it actually tells you, this will not affect whether or not you're paid for the survey. Did you answer honestly? Do you feel like your results should matter in this survey? Mm-hmm. Because if you say no, then they just throw it in the trash. You still get paid, but now they're capturing the statistics of how many people lie. Mm-hmm. I thought that was rather interesting. I've seen that happen lately.
Well, talking about statistics, this is just one of those funny things as we're talking about alcohol. Mm. So remember how there used to be studies that were coming out about people who, if you drink a glass of wine a day or whatever,
it's good for your heart. Yeah.
Do you know where that came from?
I remember you telling me, but tell me because it's funny.
Right. So here's the thing: is when they're comparing people who drink moderately, like a glass of wine a day or a beer a day or something of that nature. So they're comparing it against two other groups: people who drink heavily and people who don't drink at all. The issue is the group that they study that don't drink at all are typically former alcoholics that have gone cold turkey. So the notion that drinking a glass of wine is better for you than no alcohol is not true, because what you're comparing with is the heart of someone who who had a
drinking problem prior.
Right, so like who drank excessively. So compared to someone who drinks moderately versus someone who used to drink excessively, the person who drinks moderately will be better, especially compared to someone who drinks heavily still. But it's almost impossible to find someone that has never drank to compare to the person who drinks moderately. But the less you drink, the better your heart is, because alcohol is just shit for your heart. There's no way around that.
I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, alcohol is good for one thing: being inebriated.